So Chia has a new wallet. It's not that new, but it's still pretty new, and it's being run by, I'd say, one of the oldest wallet developers in the Chia ecosystem. I'd like to welcome Rigidity to FoMO. Rigidity, this is the first time you've ever been on FoMO. Really excited to have you here so we can talk about Sage Wallet. I know that you're well known in the Chia ecosystem and community, but maybe if you could just give us a brief introduction of yourself, and yeah, let's talk about wallets on Chia.
Yep. My name's Brandon Haggstrom. I go by Rigidity Online, and I've been a developer for around 10 years now. And um, I got introduced to the Chia community or Chia ecosystem as like my first blockchain by someone named Scott with the Digital Farming Initiative project, and we kind of co-founded that to build a wallet, and we were planning on making an NFT marketplace. And so I really started off with building Arbor Wallet, and then we also contributed to the Serious Labs hackathon, where we submitted Arbor Place as one of the projects, and ended up winning the hackathon. And yeah, that was how I got into Chia.
Yeah, so you're working on Arbor Wallet, which I remember was one of the first wallets that largely was available in Chia, and then Nukel was out. So at that time, there were kind of these two wallets that were competing with each other, as well as the official Chia wallet. So do you feel like with what you had experienced in Arbor Wallet, did that inform anything with Sage, or is Arbor Wallet so far in the distant past that it's not even worth thinking about?
I think I learned a lot of things not to do when building wallets, and one of them was Arbor Wallet kind of relied on having a central server running in the background to make sure that the wallet kept in sync. And so if that node that was running on that server went down, then everyone's wallet would fall out of sync. And I believe that's the same situation that Nuka Wallet had, and various other wallets. And the downside of that is you're kind of relying on that service to stay up in order to use the wallet. So if you want to be fully decentralized, you would need to run your own node and connect to that, which Arbor Wallet didn't even have support for. Or you could connect to random nodes on the network instead of a central node. So that's kind of what I did in Sage, was changing that from a central server to talking to the peers on the network directly.
Because that kind of came out of how generalized wallet syncing should work, and I know that you had a chip out there that was something that was pretty difficult in the early days, just to try to figure out exactly how you were going to sync a wallet on Chia, because there's finding standard puzzle hashes and whatever, and then there's also hinting, and there was an entire effort to try to get the entire process for how to figure out what all the balances were for a wallet with respect to standard transaction, cats, NFTs, and you led the charge on that one, right? Internally at Chia, that was your responsibility for that chip. Is that chip 21?
Chip 26.
26.
Yep. So with Arbor Wallet, I didn't have to worry about any of that because it was only supporting XCH. But once you start branching out to those other types of assets, you need to have a way to first of all hint the coins. So when you send a cat to someone, you have to indicate that that cat belongs to a certain wallet address. That way, whoever owns the wallet address can find the coin later on. And so I created, first of all, chip 20, which might be what you're thinking of, which is a standard for hinting coins on chain like that. You basically just put the wallet address in the memo field of a coin, and then the full nodes will index that by the hint. And when you look up coins by your address on the blockchain, you can find coins that were hinted.
So what this is, just to give everybody a little bit more color on this, there's a sense of who owns a coin in Chia, and that who owns a coin, there's kind of two ways to calculate this. There's a thing called an outer puzzle hash and an inner puzzle hash. And if you look back into the way distant past of Chia, we didn't have this thing called an inner puzzle hash. And really what that means is the standard transaction sits at the inside of most of the more exotic assets that have been created in Chia. But there are still a few lingering things which don't have an inner puzzle hash, and they're sort of predate the inner puzzle hash. So what we're talking about here is that if you actually want to find out what things you own, you have to find out what things have an inner puzzle hash, which is a puzzle hash that you control. And so this hinting process is a way to find coins so that you don't have to do massive amounts of calculation, because the more the more comprehensive way to figure out what assets you own is to go through and say, well, here's all of the puzzle hashes that I'm in control of by calculating some set of derivation indexes, starting at 0, going through whatever, and then calculating the outer puzzle hash based on whatever that particular asset is. And this is a significant amount of calculation if you want to do it this way. And for certain types of players in the ecosystem, they actually weren't hinting their coins correctly, and so you could miss coins if you weren't calculating these outer puzzle hashes. How much of that do you still see? Because I know I ran into this at Evergreen, where people would try to sync their old wallets, and then they'd say, hey, not all my assets are showing up. And it was like, oh yeah, that's right, we got to have this setting where we can turn on outer puzzle hashes for really old stuff and for hardened puzzle hashes. Like there have been these transition periods in the way Chia works over time, and so the more you support these really old wallets, the more you have to get into this kind of junk. Like how much of that are you starting to hit these days? I saw you had a post about hardened puzzle hashes recently.
Yeah, I definitely still see issues like this pretty frequently. I know that the really old versions of the Chia wallet didn't use to hint coins. So if you had a cat, essentially, like you were saying, what you'd do is you'd have all of your wallet addresses, which are derivations of your public key. You would essentially just wrap each of them in all of the different cat puzzles that your wallet supports. So if you have 1,000 addresses and 100 cats, you would now have 100,000 unique cat addresses to look up. At some point, the Chia wallet changed from doing it that way to using this new hinting mechanism, and there was like a crossover period where both the unhinted and hinted coins were supported in the wallet. But at some point, they switched over to requiring all of the coins be hinted, and the wallet can no longer sync the old coins that weren't hinted by default. And so if you created a Chia wallet way back when it wasn't supported and had an unhinted cat and load that into either Sage or the Chia wallet today, you won't actually see that in your balance. So you have to jump through hoops to manually spend the coin in order to recover that.
And you mentioned derivation, and I've seen the derivation setting on my wallet. Can you two developers explain what this derivation setting is to me?
Yeah, I usually describe a derivation as just an address. Essentially, you have a master public key for your wallet or a master secret key, and in order to have multiple addresses in the wallet, you derive children of the public key. And there's a standard path that Chia uses, which is like the 12,381st child, followed by the 8,444th child, followed by the second child, and then you have like the derivation index after that. So if you have 1,000 addresses, it's really just 1,000 different derivations of the same public key converted into an address.
Yeah, let me take another stab at this. So a lot of what we see in Chia has deep history in innovations that occurred on Bitcoin. So a lot of stuff that we do in Chia is directly tied to or has the historical roots in Bitcoin improvement protocols or Bitcoin improvement proposals that have been implemented. And so there's a thing called hierarchical derivations. And so I've actually got this on the screen. And look, Lucas, all this math like makes sense, right? It's super easy to understand. Like, there you go.
You're giving me a headache. Hide the math, please.
So this is all this math essentially translates to this. What Rigidity just said is you start with one key, and that key can then be used to create other keys. And what you want is for that process to always be repeatable. So you start from your seed phrase, you're either 12 words or 24 words. That gets you some amount of entropy. And then you sort of let everything flow downhill from that, and it's all on the elliptical curve. And what that allows you to do is to have a repeatable set of keys that you can generate based on your original seed phrase. And so that's what an HD wallet is. And that's sort of been the de rigueur standard in all of Bitcoin for a long time. And a lot of other blockchains have followed along with this same thing, because it's actually a pretty cool way to do it. So this innovation was pretty neat. Before we had this, what would happen is you would just generate some private key, and then you would need to somehow keep track of the private keys that you had generated. And there was no obvious way to do that. So this is a way that you could start from something that was relatively easy to remember, something you could load into your brain or put on a piece of paper or stamp into steel, and then you'd be able to repeat that process and then find all of your stuff. Like, finding all of your stuff is sort of a difficult challenge when it comes to blockchains. Like, syncing your wallet is essentially going into the database that is the blockchain and finding all of your stuff in some reasonable way. And so this is what HDD allows you to do, is have a repeatable process to find all that stuff. And so a derivation just means, am I at the first repeatable thing that can be generated? Am I at the second, the third, blah, blah, blah. And so you've got to start from some place and generate them all. And this is the process by doing this. There are actually more exotic ways of generating private keys, and you don't have to use this at all. Like, you can just pay to some random private key and it'll totally work. So essentially the way that the Chia blockchain works is, in the standard transaction, you put a public key in there. You essentially curry in a public key. And so it's like a pay to public key hash, kind of in the way that we would think about this in the world of Bitcoin. So that's really what you're doing, is you're just generating a bunch of public keys, and then you're wrapping the Chia puzzle around it, and then you're encoding that in a certain way, and that's how you get to an XCH address. And so this is what these derivations are all about.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that there's two kinds of derivations. There's both hardened and unhardened, and it's pretty confusing to people, I think.
Yeah, even the terminology, because when we talk about an unhardened, there's a generator that you can produce, and that generator allows you to create a what's essentially a read-only wallet, and that's how the cloud wallet is working, right? Rigidity is essentially you're creating a read-only wallet, and then you're interfacing to the cloud wallet and only allowing for changes to happen if you let the signer manage the private keys.
Yeah, it's similar, but I think for the cloud wallet, it doesn't use BLS keys at all. It uses a single SecP key. That way you can use your phone as a signer. I don't think...
because the phone doesn't support BLS, right?
Yeah, you'd have to do that at the software level, which isn't as secure. But for the Sage wallet, you can import your master public key, and it will generate the addresses just from the public key alone, rather than needing the secret key. The caveat being that you can only generate unhardened or observer keys that way. You can't generate those old hardened keys. And there's different privacy and security trade-offs between the two kinds.
Well, you mentioned the cloud wallet. What's the relationship between Sage and the cloud wallet?
Sage is a project that I'm working on personally, and the cloud wallet is owned by Chia Network. They currently are quite different. The cloud wallet uses this new vault primitive, which allows you to custody your assets with multi-sigs, like iOS signer. You can use passkeys, and there's recovery options. So it's much more advanced custody than what you have in traditional Chia wallets today. Whereas Sage is just a like reimagination of what a light wallet can be on Chia. I think in the future, Sage might have more of that vault functionality built in, but right now it's mostly just a BLS wallet.
And so interesting. And you mentioned the focus on getting away from being harnessed to one node and decentralizing for stage. But why whenever I hear CNI is building a cloud wallet, I think about notions of getting away from the cloud. But are these different clouds, or is the idea that that the blockchain is the cloud for the cloud wallet? What's going on there with cloud?
Well, with Arbor Wallet and Nickel, there's essentially just one full node that's running on a VPS that I was having trouble keeping in sync, and so it was going down all the time, and I didn't really want to maintain that infrastructure. But the idea is kind of the similar, is that you have a full node running in the background, and you keep the user's public keys on the server, and you are syncing their balances and coins without needing their secret key. And then when they make a transaction, you're sending a signing request to them, which they can approve or reject. I mean, the cloud wallet is much more reliable infrastructure, and I think it's for one of the main reasons that you'd want that is for enterprise customers where they don't want to run their own infrastructure or need to have a node running locally, for example. I think for people who are more conscious about the privacy aspect, they would want to run their own local wallet still.
Yeah, there's a couple of considerations on wallets. Like if you think about what you fundamentally need to do, somebody has to have the data, right? So if you have some iOS app, right, then that thing has to connect to a database somewhere, and usually you don't have the Chia blockchain database local on your phone, so it can't just do a local lookup. What it's got to do is make an API call or an RPC call to ask about the coins that are specific to your HDD wallet, you know, your particular keychain. And if that thing that you're talking to is a centralized thing that exists somewhere, if that thing goes offline, if it stops running, your wallet will just sit there looking at you stupidly and not do anything because it doesn't have any way to get the data it needs to be able to say, do I have any new coins? Have any of those coins been spent? It's functionally can't do anything. So the idea that you would decentralize that and say, you don't need to depend on a particular endpoint, but you can just get it from the Chia blockchain swarm. That's a more robust way, and it makes it so that it isn't brittle in that sense. And that's what we were talking about Arbor, that it had a centralized backend, and that's actually what Nukel had too. So we've had this problem pretty repeatedly in the ecosystem. Over and over again. So it's really been only the Chia Light Wallet and Sage probably that did it the decentralized way. Is that right, Rigidity?
There was a mobile wallet called Keyspace, which I believe was also doing the Light Wallet protocol, but those are the only three that I know of.
Gotcha. Now that makes more sense.
I think that regardless, it's always important to have a way, even if your wallet is living in the cloud, to take it offline and make transactions with it externally.
And how do you do that? Does it queue up transactions, or what happens if you take your wallet offline?
And by offline, I just mean outside of that centralized API. Like, for example, with Nukel, I believe if Nukel went down, you can still import your mnemonic into the reference wallet. It would still show all of your coins there. Now, unfortunately, Arbor Wallet was designed with a custom pay-to puzzle, meaning that no other wallet would actually support the derivations that it created, and you wouldn't see any of your coins in the wallet if you imported it elsewhere. That was an oversight when developing it.
Wow, I didn't realize that that some wallets generated on, or some addresses generated on wallets would be specific to that.
Well, you don't know. I mean, that's the thing about what an address is. An address is just an encoding of a puzzle hash, and so a puzzle hash can really be anything. And actually, Rigidity and I were having a discussion about this, about clawback coins, right? Like, we're all very excited about the prospect of clawbacks in Chia, but the reality of a clawback is it's a special kind of puzzle, and that special puzzle isn't the standard transaction. And so it's possible that if you send a clawback transaction to a naive implementation of Chia, that Chia endpoint that you're trying to send it to wouldn't know anything about it. And I'm using the wrong words even here. There's no endpoints in Chia. There's nothing like this. You're just paying to a particular puzzle hash, but like a centralized exchange probably would not understand a clawback transaction unless it was specifically coded to support that. So, the standard transaction is usually what gets implemented, and so that's the bare minimum that you need to support. And so what we're talking about here is Arbor didn't do this standard transaction, it was doing something else, and that oversight meant that unless you were to go in and specifically add support for that particular type of puzzle, then that wallet wouldn't be able to see it. And that's how everything works. So clawback is a new puzzle. It's relatively new. It came out last year, I think. And if the wallet you're using doesn't support that, then it just can't find those coins at all. It would look like there was nothing associated with your wallet, or if it found it because it was a hinted coin, it might not know how to deal with it correctly to actually work with it, because it wouldn't know how to properly deal with the puzzle that was presented to it.
Yeah, and I think two things kind of hurt the adoption of clawbacks. I don't think there was a chip for it, so you'd have to look at the underlying implementation of the code to understand how it works and how to implement it in your own wallet. And also, the puzzle is relatively complicated to understand. So I think both of those things contributed to it not being widely adopted by other wallets.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about. I saw that exchange between you two, but before that exchange, I had not thought about clawbacks as being as changing what a wallet could see of I don't know, your assets or your things that are on Chia.
Yeah, and in fact, this is one of the things that I'm hoping to solve sometime this year. Is if you design a new Chia-Lisp standard or puzzle for coins, you have to explicitly get every wallet to support it. And I think it would be preferable if there was a way to describe how a coin can be found and spent inside of a schema. And then you could arbitrarily combine the schemas to make a wallet understand how to spend your coins. It gets complicated, but I think that would be a nice thing to have. Since it's pretty common that you want to add additional functionality in between the two layers. Like you have the pay2 puzzle hash, which is the custody of the asset, and you have the outer puzzle, which is what the asset is. But in between those two things, you often want to change the behavior of it, like a clawback, and being able to describe that in a schema would be nice.
And this is all stuff that, in some ways, Bitcoin's been insulated from, because it really hasn't had a diversity of asset types. It's had a few different ways that you could generate addresses, but they're kind of all variations on a theme. But in Chia, we've gotten to the point where we're starting to develop pretty exotic asset types, and so there's not just the actual Chia Lisp itself, which is what we refer to as the puzzle. Then there's the driver code around it, how you interact with it, how you find the coins. And so there's still been a lot of state-of-the-art stuff that's been happening, even through last year, trying to develop how all of this stuff can function and interact together. It's kind of a hard problem to solve, but like I think we've made a lot of progress in the infrastructure of it. And what Rigidity is describing here, I think it sounds fascinating. I think some sort of mechanism to describe coins and their interactions is going to be pushing the ecosystem forward in a direction that's really positive, because right now it is very manual. Like if let's say Sage supports something really cool and innovative, Sage to Sage, it'll work. because Sage works and it has the support for it. But if you go Sage to Gobi or you go Sage to the Light wallet and they're not all synced up and normalized into the ecosystem, then you'll have some that are seeing things and some that aren't, and then you won't really know who to go to say why isn't it working correctly unless you can introspect and look deep into the code and say, wow, because it doesn't support the specific asset. And that's not obvious and definitely not that user friendly to know what the compatibility specification is. So it might also get to the point where we need to start saying, here's the Chia compatibility level, and we'll start to have some standards around that saying, Sage is 2.1 compliant and Gobi is only 1.8. So if you're going to send it to somebody else, you have to make sure that you're compliant in some fashion or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate truth is that your average user is only going to understand, hey, I don't see the coins in my wallet, something must be wrong. They don't know, like, oh, this wallet doesn't support hardened keys, for example. And that was a problem I had with Gobi, is if someone tried to import their Gobi wallet into Sage, they would just not see anything in their wallet because Sage didn't support hardened keys at the time, and Gobi was defaulting to them.
Is Gobi still under active development? Do you know? Or are they kind of done?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, because that's pretty old school to be using hardened keys by default and not to support unhardened that much. Like that's unhardened keys was a change that was proposed by Chia to be the default quite some time ago.
Yeah.
So Sage, I use Sage. I haven't used Gobi much, but I've used Sage in the Light wallet. Sage seems to, I don't know, be more responsive and quicker. Like, can you talk to some of the other improvements or changes that you've made in the Sage wallet as compared to the Light wallet?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest thing, and first of all, if you run your own full node and connect the Chia reference wallet to it, you'll notice a much faster experience. Like your coins will sync a lot faster, and you won't have any issues staying connected. So that's one of the things I did in Sage, is I tried to take that same responsiveness and apply it to every node that you're talking to. So essentially, the reason that the untrusted nodes are slower in the reference wallet is because it's doing additional validations. So when you are reaching out to 5 full nodes, for instance, the first thing that it does in the Chia wallet is it requests a proof of weight for that node. So it will essentially prove that the peak height that it's claimed is actually valid by verifying the weight proof up to that point. And that process takes a fair amount of time to complete. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but it's validating a weight proof for every node. And once it does that, it's going to request coins from that node using your addresses. And every single coin that it receives, it's going to verify that that coin was included in the blockchain using a proof of inclusion. And that is a very time-consuming process, especially if you have like 100,000 coins. And something that people have noticed is that if you are talking to an untrusted node in that way, and you have that many coins, it can take potentially weeks for that process to complete. So you're waiting weeks for your wallet to sync, where you realistically could have just synced your own full node in that amount of time. And the way that Sage does it is it frankly just trusts what the node gives it. So it skips all of the validations that the Chia wallet is doing. And the reasoning is that the worst thing that could happen if a node gives you the wrong data is that your balance will be misreported, or you'll have coins showing up that aren't supposed to be there because they were fake, for instance. And that's about it. It won't have any security issues. You won't lose your coins as a result of it. You'll just have to resync and fetch the coins again, which would take far less time than just waiting the 2 weeks for it to sync in the first place.
Gotcha. And so now I wasn't aware of that. So that's why it runs so much more quickly. And good to know that, I mean, you answered my second question as you were describing that. So you don't lose your assets. The only thing is like assets could be spoofed, or false assets could appear in your wallet.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly rare edge case right now, at least. There's no reason that a node would want to target your wallet and spoof the information in it, really, because it doesn't really know who you are. You're just a random wallet talking to a random node. I would say that the majority of nodes are being honest, and I can't think of a reason they would want to attack the wallet in that way, and it doesn't actually result in any funds being lost or anything like that. But if you are worried about that kind of thing, then you can just run your own node just like you would with the Chia wallet. You'll just, for the majority of people who won't be affected by that or care about it, I think it improves the syncing experience a lot.
Well, I enjoy the improved syncing experience, and I just have a couple of NFTs in my wallet. So, what about the operating systems that you have Sage on? I know that you've are waiting or are having an experience trying to get it onto Apple. But what all operating systems do you have it on, and what has the experience been like with Apple?
Yeah, so Sage is built on top of a framework called Tauri, and it essentially allows you to design the app inside of a web view, which can be run on any system. So Sage supports macOS, Windows, and Linux on both ARM and x86-64, and it also supports Android and iOS. So Sage is currently on the Google Play Store and has been submitted to app review for the Apple App Store. But currently you can still access Sage on TestFlight in the meantime. And then as far as desktop platforms, there's just binaries available for download on the GitHub. And you can always compile it from source if you don't want to trust the binaries.
Now you're over my head. But when how has did you have issues with bringing in offers? Because Grant, I know that you have mentioned in the past that offers offered some hurdles whenever you were working on the Evergreen wallet. So how has that gone over with Google and Apple?
Well, Apple wants their cut. Like that's what it boils down to. Is they're always trying to extract their pound of flesh from anybody that puts their software into the App Store. So they are very diligent about looking for places where they can monetize and extract any amount of money they can. And they've lasered in on digital asset transfers. Like I don't know if you've tried to buy an ebook or stuff like that on apps that are in the App Store, but like they're always trying to get their little 25 or 30% cut that they normally had, and that was kind of a big part of the business model, which was challenged in the EU and by various big companies that have said, I don't know why certain things get singled out, because if you think about stock trading, right? Stock trading doesn't hit this same problem. Forex trading doesn't hit this same problem, but if I trade monkey pictures through the iOS store, why is that suddenly getting dinged? What's the difference between any of this different stuff? And so I think it's partially stems from Apple's still trying to monetize any apps that are doing digital asset transfers, and offers being viewed as one of these ways that that this might occur. Rigidity, what was your experience? Does that feel like what Apple's still doing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the recent review responses they gave me was essentially asking me to provide documentation of my license to be an exchange in the US, because they thought that offer files were essentially making me a centralized exchange. So I explained to them in excruciating detail how an offer file works and how it's totally decentralized and I'm not acting as a middleman in that transaction. And I think after they understood that, they stopped asking about being an exchange. I do think that there's a lot of things that I want to do in the app that they would likely consider to be a circumvention of their in-app purchase policies. But offer files, I don't think are one of them, because it's, at the end of the day, it's a peer-to-peer transaction, just like sending XCH to someone's address.
Do you feel like they understood it after you had that conversation? Did you feel like you were talking to somebody that was relatively knowledgeable on Apple side?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I might have just overwhelmed them with information and made them give up because they didn't really acknowledge my response at all. They just moved on to other things. I don't think the app review team, at least the one reviewing my app, has been particularly competent.
That's been my experience almost every single time I've had to interact with the Apple app reviewers. There's some cursory understanding, but they don't try to dig too deep. And I agree. Sometimes the strategy is to overwhelm them with information. If you can bury them in documentation and keep persistent, you can get beyond it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it rears its head the next time around. Like you get through one time and then you make some minor update and then they're right back on it again. So it can be super frustrating because then you feel like you're just treading the same ground and you're not even getting connected to somebody that you've had any discussion with in the past. It's a very frustrating process, Lucas. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I had them ask me, like, how do I comply with the EU regulations around being able to delete your account? And, so I explained to them that Sage is not, like, you're not logging into an account to use the wallet. You are creating a key which can custody assets on a blockchain, and there's no way to delete the account, but you can delete the key. And then they followed up in the next response asking me how you delete the account again. So I went through this process like 4 times, and basically asking the exact same question phrased in slightly different ways, and me responding in slightly different ways. And that was really frustrating.
Guys, I got good news for you. AI fixes this.
Yeah, I should have an AI agent just talking to them every time.
Well, I do think that these concepts of decentralization are going to be both difficult for them to understand and also possibly threatening to them once they do begin to understand them, and how they will impact their ability to monetize their application exchange. So good on you for fighting the good fight and pushing Sage Wallet through on our phones and on the platforms. But it might be a problem that you are saddled with for a while going forward.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Pocket Wallet is already on the App Store and they support offer files. So if nothing else, I can just say, hey, this app is already on there. What's the difference?
Well, and have you thought about maybe having to come to a detente and turn off maybe offers for the application whenever it's to get it included in the Apple Store, or if it comes to that, are you just going to take the high road and keep it the same as what you're releasing binaries for?
Well, I mean, I think that offer files are an essential feature of the wallet. So I'm going to fight as hard as I can to get them included in it. I don't really see a reason why they can reject it because of that. There are other features that I want to add, like DEXI combined swap in the app, which might be harder to explain away. So I'm holding off on adding those until it's through the initial review.
Yeah, I was going to ask when you said other things that you thought might cause problem were swaps. I assume swaps is high on that list.
Yeah, I mean, that's even easier to consider an exchange, especially since there is a percentage of that swap that goes to the developer, basically, either myself or the DEXI team. And another thing would be the idea of having, and I think Evergreen had something similar, NFTs that represent premium functionality or skins in the app, and explaining away that when it basically is an in-app purchase bypass. I mean, I'm not sure how that would work.
Yeah, that's a a lot of this stuff is really tricky to figure out how you could get away with it. So for Evergreen, it's explicitly had said that you're not supposed to have an NFT that enables something if that NFT is somehow operating like a license and it's a digital thing. And Yeah, these are all really tricky conversations to have because Apple really doesn't want you doing this kind of stuff. Like they've drawn some hard lines, and unfortunately, these are things that are very desirable by users. And so you either have to easily play ball and just like give Apple their cut, or you have to find some very creative way to try to solve these problems to try to get around it. So
I mean,
it's tricky.
frankly, I wouldn't have a problem giving Apple 30% of the proceeds I make in the App Store with that kind of system. It's just I don't think they allow it in general because it's not using their in-app purchase APIs. So if there was a way to get it into the App Store with the condition that I give them 30%, I would totally do that.
Gotcha. Well, we're rolling in on 40 minutes. Was there anything you wanted to tell us about the Sage wallet that we didn't ask you, or any aspects of it you wanted to cover?
I guess I'm pretty excited for what's coming up with offer files next, which is the ability to create a protected single-sided offer in Sage and accept it without having another side to that trade and keeping it all secure.
So that's essentially like a giveaway, right? You're saying I want to just like give somebody something and have that done in a way that it's not it's not something that when it's in the mempool, a sophisticated user could steal it away from you, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you create a single-sided offer in the Chia wallet today and someone accepts it, you could easily replace by fee that transaction, or the farmer could replace it. And in both cases, they can change the address that the coins are going to. Whereas with the new protected single-sided offer thing that I'm building, it's a bit convoluted, but it protects against that kind of attack. I can try to explain that if you want.
Go ahead if you would.
Okay. So when you are making an offer, you're spending one or more coins to make a payment to the settlement address, which is an intermediate address that holds the coin and can be spent by anyone to make payments. But the maker of the offer is also asserting that they get something in return, which makes the trade secure. So if you don't have that other side of the offer, then you don't have any announcements that you're asserting on the other end, which means that anyone could change the output of that transaction without invalidating it. So with protected single-sided offers, the taker of the offer essentially spends the intermediate coin that anyone can spend, but they send it to another intermediate coin that has a public key, and then they spend that to their wallet. And that public key is just randomly generated on the fly, so no one will ever have access to it again. And they sign a message with that public key and aggregate it with the original signature. And now that you have an aggregated signature, there's no way to pull the two signatures apart unless you have the original offer. So if you're inspecting the transaction in the mempool, there's no way to change the recipient address because the aggregated signature would be invalid in that case. So you would have to have the original offer file in order to replace by fee that transaction. And if you're displaying it in a secure manner, like on a QR code out in public, or not in public, but if you're at like a private venue and you have a QR code that no one else can access, then you can securely accept the offer file.
Would you say that BLS is one of the things that's particular enables you to do something like this?
Yeah, so if you are not using a BLS wallet on the maker side, for example, using a vault where it uses a passkey or a SecKey signature, then that would, without any further work, it would also make it insecure because the aggregated signature that you're adding on the taker side is only one signature. There's not two anymore. So you can easily pull apart the original offer. But if you're using a vault on the maker side, you can also create an intermediate coin there, which has a BLS signature. So regardless of which side you're making or taking the offer on, you always have to add an intermediate spend with an aggregated signature if you don't already have one. So yeah, it does rely on the BLS signatures aggregation aspect, but you can hack around not having BLS keys.
Well, there you go, Lucas. You're always asking me why BLS and how does it make it better. So there you go. I'm sure you understood all of that.
Right. Rigidity, you said vaults rely on another type of cryptography than BLS. And I think earlier you said that's because phone hardware is not capable of BLS. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if the Secure Enclave supported BLS signatures, there would be no reason to use SecP256 R1 instead. BLS has a lot of desirable properties that SecP does not. And the only reason that we're using that curve is the phone supports it in the Secure Enclave.
I like C3PO. But over the hour, anything else? Look, here we are with the Secure Enclave.
Yeah, I'll throw it in the notes in case anybody's interested in reading up more on this. Like, it's this particular part of the Apple infrastructure that's being leveraged, and it's the security of this that is being leveraged by the signer. So it's this processor in this Secure Enclave. It only supports a certain type of keys, and so essentially the way that this chip works is you say, create me a key pair, and it'll cough up the public key, but it will never cough up the private key. So using the Secure Enclave, you can say, I want you to sign this, or I want you to encrypt this, but it won't give you the private keys back, which that one-way street makes this a really interesting part of the iOS infrastructure, and that's what's being leveraged. And so it's because Apple doesn't support BLS inside their Secure Enclave, so who knows, maybe there'd be some firmware update in the future or something, but yeah, because it doesn't support it, that's why BLS is not the thing that we're using right now for this type of interaction.
Yeah, I think they would have to roll out new hardware in order to support BLS. But when Gene says that every phone is a Chia phone, this is what he means. You can use your phone as a signer instead of needing to go out and buy a ledger device, for example.
Well, I'm looking for the day that the Chia's One Market also replaces Apple's App Store and iTunes markets. But well over. Thanks for coming on today, Rigidity. Very, very, very much enjoyed learning about Sage. Wish you the best of luck with it, and luck with dealing with the bureaucratic process is getting it on. Anything else you want to say before we close it out?
Nope. Stay tuned for a lot of new updates soon.
All right, we'll be watching, and we'll definitely have you back if the next time there's some big piece that you want to announce. Always welcome back on the show, and we'll see you guys next time on FoMO.
Thanks for having me.